Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Corey Empowers Mental Wealth Wednesday. We have a fabulous guest today, and I'm so glad that he agreed to come on and share some information about his career in law. I would like to first acknowledge May being National Mental Health Awareness Month. And for 75 years strong, mental health advocates, mental health organizations have been doing their best to reduce stigma and increase awareness about mental health conditions, resources, research, and elevating the stories of those with lived experiences and their families and loved ones who continue to support them. So, shout out to Mental Health America for going strong for 75 years and bringing other organizations like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and others along the way. So, today we have with us attorney Frederick Iverson, very good friend and a fellow lawyer. And he touches on something that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts and our interest and just wanting to know more, particularly if you watch television, or some of you may watch some of these segments on TV, not reality, and try to put together a case based on what you see on TV. That's complicated. And it can be even more complicated for someone who lives with a mental health condition. So we're going to talk about that today. But first, let's welcome attorney Rick Iverson. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, Corey. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today for this very important topic. As you know, mental health is something that is very meaningful and significant in my life. And I do my best to just try to help other people to know about the resources that are available. And unfortunately, some people find themselves involved in the criminal justice system and not knowing what to do. And I can imagine it's even more fearful for someone who has a mental health condition, specifically a severe mental illness. So, just knowing a little bit about your practice, I would really appreciate if you could just share with us about your journey in your practice and how it has developed over the years, to include not only personal injury and employment plaintiffs' work in sexual harassment cases, but also criminal representation. That's very important for people to have quality legal representation when they're going through the criminal justice system. So I really would love for you to share with us how you developed your practice and specifically your criminal defense work.
Well, I got started in Ohio as a juvenile public defender. That was Franklin County, Columbus, and I came on board with them. After graduating from law school, I initially worked for a bank, Huntington National Bank, and thought I was going to be a businessman and go back and get my MBA as well as my JD and one day take over the world and be a billionaire. And, you have all of those ideas. And after spending about a year and a half at the bank, I was in a management trainee program. I toured all areas of the bank, and it was time for me to accept a position. They made me an offer, and I was going to be a bank auditor. And it did not touch my soul. I was not inspired. The funny part is if I had become a bank auditor and developed that expertise, good chance I'd be, maybe not a billionaire, but I'd be worth a lot of money right now.
Mm.
It would have been a lucrative career, but what really inspired me, after I got my law degree, after I passed the bar, I knew I wanted to be in the courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I didn't know that I wanted my own practice at the time, but I was always drawn to criminal law, to the idea of the courtroom, talking to a jury. And on a whim, I walked down the street. Literally, it was on the same street as the bank, High Street in Columbus, Ohio. For anyone who knows Columbus, that is the main street, High Street. About 4 or 5 blocks, I walked down to call it the Justice Center. I don't know what the official name for it is. It's been so long ago. This was back in '96. Long time dating myself. Walked down and I went to the public defender's office and literally asked a receptionist who was at a window, are you hiring? And she told me to hold on. She went and got the supervisor of the office. She came out, spoke to me, told me they were interviewing for a position. I mean, this is 96. You know, I'm talking about no resume. I didn't have a resume on me. Anything. I just walked in and asked a question.
Mhm.
She took my information and they said they'd get back with me. And a couple of weeks later, they called me in for an interview. I interviewed. They called me back that evening and told me that they really liked me, but they were going with a guy who had a lot more experience at the time. But if anything came up, they would be giving me a call.
Mhm.
I said, hey, that was cool. I appreciated them. It was about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they called me and told me someone in the office had just announced their retirement.
Mm.
And if I wanted the position, it was mine. Now I'm at the bank. I'm going to be a bank auditor. Notice submitted. I was done. I knew at that point I'm out of here, buddy.
Yeah.
America was not for me. And I was, was within a couple of weeks, I was working as a public defender in Franklin County. And I mean, I was thrown into the fire. I showed up and they handed me, a stack of cases. And within the next week, I was in a trial. And this is juveniles, mind you,
Mhm. Mhm.
juveniles. So there's a little less, slightly, it's more informal.
Right.
And I was also doing guardian ad litem work, which was very, very serious work in the sense that you step into the shoes of the parent for kids that are alleged to be abused or neglected. And
Mhm.
I had some tragic stories. Uh, it was
Yeah.
real life, and real harms to children. Yeah, yeah, but at the same time, I always tell people it's you're doing God's work because you're looking at some tough situations, but you get to bring your life experience, your compassion, your really empathy and caring to someone's
Mhm.
life, and that's always been more fulfilling to me than you know maybe being that billionaire or millionaire. What can I do for other people? That's always been what's driven me and kept me going through all these years.
So you found something that really touched you more than being an auditor, a bank auditor.
Right, right. And that wouldn't have, even now I say, Corey, the work that I've done, I've represented, uh, I've been doing criminal defense work in DC. I left Ohio. My then wife got into law school uh, at Georgetown. And so we left Columbus. I hadn't been at the public defenders. I've been there for less than a year, but we relocated here to DC.
Mhm.
Took me close to a year and a half before I was able to be barred here because I'm barred in Ohio.
Mhm.
But once I was barred, I started here at the beginning of 1998. I started practicing criminal law in DC and under the auspices of the Criminal Justice Act. And back then, you just showed up and said, "I want cases," and they said, "You're licensed. Let's go."
Mhm.
Over that time, I probably represented uh, well over 2,500 clients charged with various criminal offenses in DC, from misdemeanor up to homicide. And yeah, it's been a career.
So from the mid 90s, let's say, to 2024, what has been the through line for your workload and the cases that you've seen?
Oh, uh, it's diverse. I mean, every year, I mean, the way the cases are assigned, the way I picked up cases for a long time, in addition to people who would just call me and I would obtain, would be the court. You just get assigned a case. Like I said, it
Mhm.
might be misdemeanor. I didn't do a lot of traffic, but I've done traffic. And then you're looking at someone charged with homicide.
Right.
So it runs the gamut. So you never know, who you're going to be looking at and what sort of case you're going to be handling. Back in the we're talking about late 90s, 2000s, a lot more drug cases.
Mhm.
We were constantly doing you know, uh drug, which in DC you called them I haven't used the term you had undercovers and you had buy bus operations. So you'd have, a group of policemen would go out in the street and, you'd have an undercover walk up and he'd make a buy and there'd be 6 or 7 other police, one set of eyes watching the transaction, it's another police officer, but then you'd have an arrest team waiting on the radio for the signal to go to arrest someone. And so you had all of these people being arrested for drugs, and that was a big part of my practice. Really nowadays, what's taken over guns and violent offenses. You know, anyone who lives in DC is aware of the carjacking epidemic. A lot more violent offenses, and that's really where the police are focused now. I hardly ever see drug cases. And the population has changed so drastically that a lot of the demographics are going to drive that, because really in DC during that entire time, the only people that were being arrested were African Americans, because that's where the policing was focused. Not that there were drugs in Georgetown and upper Northwest, not on the college, on the college campuses, but if you go looking for crime, you will find crime, and primarily police were only looking in Black neighborhoods. So
so from the tragic cases that you had in Ohio to some of the more violent oriented crimes here in DC, those that you have represented, do they have common characters other than being African American, if that's one of the things, but just dealing with trauma and dealing with violence as a part of the environment? Have you found there to be a commonality with your clients, and how have you addressed that with your cases?
Well, that's a hard question for me to answer, because I was only at the public defender's office for a year, less than a year, and I was dealing with juveniles. And the juveniles we weren't, at that time, you were not looking at the same level of violence, the same level of gun violence. There's nowhere near the same as when I was in Ohio, as when I came to DC. And I have had, when I first got here, when I first started practicing, I did represent some juveniles, and I represented juveniles for about 3 or 4 years. No, it had to be a little longer, maybe 5 or 6, because I remember a young man that I represented. He was 14 at the time, little bitty. When I say he was a little bitty guy, hadn't hit puberty yet. But it picked up a case where he was, because he had assaulted someone. I think it was a stabbing case. But it was because he was being bullied. He stabbed the person that was bullying him, but that's an assault with a dangerous weapon, knife. ADW, we call it. But I had him that's how I know how long I was doing juvenile. He turned, I think, 18 or 19. And it was really, part of when you're a criminal defense attorney, you're also a mentor, social worker. People don't understand that part of the job. You really are doing social work. You really are. And to young Black men, as another Black man, I really am a mentor. A lot of these young men have not had a man in their life. A lot of my clients don't really have relationships with their fathers. So if I get a chance to interact with you, I'm really, I'm vested in making sure that your interaction with me is going to be something you walk away with as a Black man, saying I've had a positive experience with another Black man who showed that he cared for me, was compassionate about my situation, and I've had a chance to pass on some of the lessons of manhood that were instilled in me as I've come into manhood, and I'm still traveling this road. I've been able to pass that on to a lot of my clients. But going back to the story, I won't say his name, but the young man, I have to be careful whenever I tell this story. I got to see him grow up and come into manhood, and I can still remember talking to him for the last time when he told me that he was taking care. I want to say that he might have had a child, um, but I know he was working. He was taking care of his grandmother, was very much a part of his life.
Mm,
And he was just talking about responsibility. And you could tell that he was on track and he was doing
mm,
the thing, and I felt good about him. He was, the case was really over. We were just in contact from time to time. Uh, and I remember I was in the court. I still remember where I was standing. I was close to the main entrance, and his old PO, probation officer. I don't know if they call him probation officer for juveniles. It's been so long since I've done juvenile work. Uh, but his PO came up to me and he said, you heard about such and such, saying his name. And, I'm used to clients being rearrested. That's just a part of the game. Nothing unusual. And so I was geared like, oh man, he got arrested. He was doing so well. I'm ready to hear that. And he told me he was, shot and killed, you know,
mm.
earlier. And only time I've ever cried in the courthouse. Only time something's ever brought me to tears. Uh, just yeah, I think that he might have been one of the first clients that I lost. I've lost a lot of clients,
Mm,
gun violence since then. But he's the person that sticks in my mind. And, this is a tragedy because he was a young man who was literally at the beginning of his walk through life
yeah.
and should not, should not have happened. You know,
Mhm.
he was not, yeah, should not have happened. But, that's the story for too many young men.
Right.
It's, you know, I think we're numb to it because we see it so much. Uh, but it's insanity
Mm,
that, so many young Black men have their lives cut short by gun violence. So many young Black men are ending other young Black men's lives uh, through gun violence. It's insanity, and
right.
like I said, we become numb to it. We watch the movies, and the gun violence is in the movies.
Right.
We listen to music, and there's they're rapping, singing about gun violence and what's Black on Black gun violence. And it's just there's a part of it that's just I still if you step back, it's just insanity. Because this is happening every day. Thousands of young Black men are losing their lives every year to gun violence at the hands of
Mhm.
other young Black men, and these are our young. This is our lifeblood.
Right.
These young
And you
men who should.
chose to use insanity to describe this situation and this occurrence in our culture and our environment in too many communities.
Mhm.
And the choice of using insanity is touching on a deeper issue, and that is mental health conditions of individuals. Some of us are impacted by environmental factors, there may be biological factors, but mental health conditions can show up in different ways. And with over 2,500 clients, what have you seen in terms of mental health being exhibited, whether a person has severe mental illness, has been in treatment, in and out of treatment, just as much as they've been in and out of jail? How often have you seen that? And what has been the case with some of your clients?
Ooh. Well, I just from my experience, obviously I didn't keep statistics, and I'm not giving you data, but I
Hmm.
can tell you my experience. It's hard to think of, you know, in my practice. I would say to say the greater majority. I think is that's an inexact term. Uh, but I want to say, if you count greater majority as 55%, 60%, 70%, that's probably getting close to where we are as far as my clients who have some sort of mental health condition. Now that runs the gamut. One end you've got, when you say serious mental illness, uh, that's also, how are we defining that? Because I've got clients who are bipolar schizophrenic, who are
Mhm.
that's a serious mental illness, and they're on the
Right.
street, uh, and constantly being arrested, again, usually for petty crimes, some sort of trespassing, things of that nature. They come into the system, and then, of course, they don't come back to court. They pick up failure to appear cases. So you didn't appear for court. That's a crime in and of itself. Uh, a lot of these people end up, um, having mental observations or going through the forensic process where, the court has to determine whether they're competent to stand trial. And a lot of them are deemed incompetent to stand trial after a lengthy process. And then, DC have to decide, whether they're going to be civilly committed or not. Uh, and civil commitment can mean that you're actually at St. Elizabeth's Hospital and you're housed there, or you were civilly committed, but you're outpatient.
Mhm.
There's a civil commitment. Um, that's one end of the spectrum. But the other end, and when I say the other end, I think it's still serious when you start talking about my clients who suffer from depression,
Mhm.
of who are bipolar, maybe bipolar two, and not rather than full blown bipolar,
Or
or
dealing with psychotic characteristics like hallucinations and delusions.
right. So they might, yeah, and they PTSD, and
Mhm.
that's a because and really we're talking about individuals that are for the most part undiagnosed, young black men. I mean, it's hard enough for older black men to go to the hospital to seek the uh, help that they need when they need it.
Mhm.
So you can imagine being from the inner city, being on a certain on the lower socioeconomic strata, and you know, finding help, or recognizing help, and all the stigmas that go along with that. Where does a young man who's just trying to find himself find the wherewithal to say, I am going to seek mental health? I suffer from PTSD because I watched a friend killed.
Mm.
I suffer from PTSD because I go to school every day. And as I walk to school, I've been threatened by gun violence. I've had a gun pulled on me. I'm actually worried, about being killed by a gun because that is just the reality of, where I live and my situation, you know, and it's nothing new. I'm not saying anything that anyone else hasn't heard, but the studies that show that a lot of young men in inner cities who are in these environments. You start to think of New York, DC, Chicago, hell, Cleveland. Oh, it's everywhere.
Mhm.
Uh, that they demonstrate the same symptoms, the same pathologies as individuals who are in war zones.
Mm.
If you think about it, it is a war zone, right? If you wake up every day, I mean, we don't experience this, Corey. I don't wake up worried that I'm going to be shot.
Mm.
Um, I don't wake up worried that I may have to shoot somebody. So in my mind, even though I know it's illegal, I shouldn't have this gun. I've told myself that I have to arm myself, as a deterrent or to protect myself because I know that being shot is a real possibility. I don't know that life.
Mm.
I don't know that life, but
So
again,
how do you address it with your representation of clients who may have a mental health condition or having these types of fears on a daily basis, out past the case that you may represent them on? But even during the case, how do you help your clients? And what do you suggest for others who are trying to help a loved one who is going through the system?
it's difficult. Uh, when you've got the case, we're talking. Like I said, there is a mentorship element. There is a social work element, but you're really putting out whatever fire
Mm.
is burning brightest right then. And in that case, we've got a court date coming up. You know, are we? Here's the evidence that the government has against you. Are you going to accept a plea offer? If you're not accepting a plea offer, we're going to trial. Uh, so trying to deal with mental health of an individual, unless there's a diversion prospect on the table from the government, meaning if you participate in this mental health program, you will receive this treatment, meaning treatment of your case. So we're
Hmm.
not going to prosecute you if you enter into this program and you are successful. But, if you've got a gun case, if you've got a serious felony, that's not on the table.
Mm.
So you may be
How
back.
can you push for something like that though? Like if we know that the underlying mental health condition, concern, severe mental illness is a significant issue in the reason why the person had the gun, did the offense. How do you, as the defense attorney, try to bring it to the table? Because we know that the government they're not going to necessarily be willing to offer that, as you said. But how do you, as the defense attorney, do that? Or for families who are trying to make sure whoever is appointed or the attorney that they may retain for their loved one to know that this is something that they should ask for, even if the state doesn't offer it?
Well, unfortunately, the state has, they are the gatekeepers for these programs and in DC, uh, criminal offenses are prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office.
Mm-hmm.
So the only cases that DC prosecutes for the most part are traffic offenses. Some misdemeanor gun offenses are prosecuted by the Office of the Attorney General. That's DC. But for everything else, misdemeanors through homicides, the United States government, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia are prosecuting those cases, and they have the discretion. Even if a judge says, this would be great, this person was in this program, uh, you have to get the assent of the government.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own they have their own policies, guidelines, and one of the things that uh, is frustrating is that for mental health diversion court, uh, a prior felony, serious felony, is a disqualifier.
Wow.
Well, now you've got a guy that's, he's got a fairly minor case, misdemeanor. He's got a 10-year-old felony, but he's got some serious mental health issues. And he would definitely benefit. The community would benefit, from him receiving mental health treatment while we've got him here on this minor case, but he can't go in because he's got that, felony record for that felony that he committed back when he was, 18, 19 years old.
So they don't drop off at any particular point? Because even when you put somebody on the stand, if they have something from 10 years ago, you can't bring it up, right?
Right? They look back in your history and they see that serious.
Wow.
Can exceptions be made? Yes, but are they made? Very seldom.
What can a family do? What can families do? What can advocates do to try to maybe educate the court, educate the government to help in these situations?
Well, you can always speak in DC. You can always speak to your council person and see where that gets you. I'm not saying that it's not impactful, because definitely U.S. Attorney's Office is involved in the community and seeking the help, cooperation. What's the right word? They want the community to consider them partners, that they're there to serve. But there's this duality where, the U.S. Attorney's Office is prosecuting young Black men, and they're looking at young Black men as a problem. But these families that you're talking about, these are their sons. So, I haven't seen the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're not soft on crime. And a lot of young prosecutors, and it's really their supervisors, because a lot of prosecutors in DC don't have a lot of discretion. They have to get approval from supervisors, and these people aren't just handing out um, opportunities. They aren't,
Right.
saying we're going to deviate from the policies and guidelines. This is it. He's not qualified. Let's move on. So now we're in trial mode if we're not taking that plea, and we don't get a chance to address the mental health issues, and you know, and I go win the case for him. So there's an acquittal, but you still got an individual who had the situation hasn't been rectified for that individual
In terms of the mental health treatment.
in terms of his mental health treatment, and that's
Mhm.
that's one of those things. If you've got your hands on somebody and they're under the dictates of the court, it's a good chance to try to deal with that person and get services into their life. But again, uh, that usually doesn't take place unless someone is convicted. And if you are convicted as a part of your sentence, whether you got to serve time and then come out and be on a period of supervised release or probation. Supervised release is like parole. Uh, or probation, where you're going, your judge has got control if you commit any new offenses. But there are special conditions, and usually at that point, there's been an assessment to see
Mhm.
whether mental health is an issue and whether you should get treatment. And that also happens on the court system is good about uh, making assessments of individuals. So you've got a specialized supervision unit that's pre-trial
Mhm.
before you plead, before you go to trial. You have pre-trial who monitors individuals who are on release,
Mhm.
and they have a mental health component, and they do try to get mental health treatment for individuals who need it. And if the court orders that as part of your release conditions, you'll get it.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't. That's not as in. It's. I don't really see that kick in as much as it is there, uh, but it's really if someone's convicted and you
Mhm.
got a sentence and it's a part of your sentence. A part of your sentence, those conditions that you got to get mental health treatment, where it kicks in to a higher degree there. You
There
know.
is some criticism once a person is incarcerated, whether they're just incarcerated during the time they're waiting for trial or serving their sentence, that they're not receiving the treatment that they need to have and therefore get in additional trouble, additional charges, perhaps for a fight or some kind of negative interaction with the staff. What can family members do to ensure that their loved one is receiving, like, for example, mental health medication while they're incarcerated?
Well, you'll get your medication. I don't. Uh, I know there are problems with that because in the sense of now you've got staffing, you don't have your doctor. Uh,
And it seems to be better when a person actually has an attorney, because there's only so many calls that the jail or the court is going to take from a family member. But with an attorney, you're representing that person, and there are things that you have the right to do on behalf of your client versus a family member. So can you touch on that?
you can always ask for the assistance of the judge. You can always, we have medical alerts. If someone's going to be, we call it step back. If someone's arrested and they're held pending trial,
Mhm.
you can put in a medical alert and you can say, it basically alerts jail to a medical condition, mental health condition. A judge is going to look at that, sign that, and it goes with the individual to his place of incarceration. In this case, the DC jail, or that's what a central detention facility or central treatment facility, is CTF. So we have two jails right next to each other. That goes both run by the Department of Corrections now. It used to be the case that one was private through CCA or corporation. What is it? Uh, I forget the CCA acronym, but in any case, there's both DLC now. Department of Corrections run, and that goes with you. And they do have mental health professionals, and you'll get your medicine. You may not get the medicine you were taking because
Mhm.
obviously different doctors have different regiments. You're talking about insurance, what's being paid for, because this is on the state's dime now, or DC's dime.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing when I go to get my medication. Uh, if I needed, I went to the doctor the other day and he prescribed medication, and I went to pick it up, and the guy said, the insurance company didn't approve this one.
Like the generic version versus.
Well, this is a whole different medicine.
Oh.
But, I think, it was very expensive. And even though I pay for my insurance and I pay a lot of money, no, whoever that rep was that, looks at that and approves the payout from the insurance company said no. So you can imagine the same thing happening. Your mental health professional may have prescribed this medication, but we have another one that serves the same method, and it may be a lot cheaper because there's definitely a budget. And I don't want to say too much on that because that's not my area.
Right.
But I'm just saying,
but more importantly, that people know that they can use their voice. Like, program, I'm trying to encourage people to use their voices, to know about resources that they can tap into or learn more about. And in this case, we are talking about DC, and you also shared a little bit about your experience in Ohio. So just taking a moment here to encourage people, wherever you're listening from, whichever state that you're in, to look for the same or similar type of program in your community. For example, Attorney Iverson mentioned setbacks. And based on that description, perhaps you could
step back.
Yes.
You came in one door, you're leaving out the other door.
So you can find what the program may be in your area that's similar to that. Also, it sounds very much like you described what is known as the assisted outpatient treatment. So like when a person is out in the community, but that is governed by the court. The court monitors the person's following of the orders that they're given. And some of that may be in terms of connecting with services in the community, mental health services in the community, their medication, and actually taking that medication, having it administered in whatever way that a community organization provides that service. So just wanted to take a moment to encourage people to find out more about what may be the specific program in their area, and just generally hearing Attorney Iverson today sharing some of the procedural aspects of this and how these different services can layer in the overall case completion, disposition.
So just to be clear, step back is not a program.
Mm-hmm.
Step back is when it's a bad thing for an attorney. If your client gets stepped back, the judge decided to take him off the street, him or her. So that's a bad thing. But as far as programs, you do touch on the programs. So like in DC, and I think DC has a pretty good pretrial system.
Mm-hmm.
So they have what's called within CSOSA, they have a pretrial division that monitors individuals while they're on pretrial release, while they're, proceeding through, the process of, their prosecution. So, and a case might last for a year and a half. So during that time, pretrial is monitoring that individual. And at the request of the court, at the request of an attorney, pretrial can do an assessment of the individual to see if they're in need of mental health services.
Mm-hmm.
CSOSA has what's called the Specialized Supervision Unit. A good friend of mine is part of that. Pretrial for SSU, and they're pretty good if you qualify. There's some ups and downs because something like depression might not get you through the door. You might have to have a more serious, anxiety. You might have to have something more serious. We're always fighting that as attorneys because we're saying this is something that needs to be treated, and they need to be, in SSU, and SSU might be saying, no, that doesn't meet our guidelines. Sorry, we can't do it. But if you are in SSU, you do have a component where people are looking out over your mental health and making sure that you're connected. And when I say connected, you have a series of mental health providers in DC. People might be familiar with the the organization Community Connections is a big one. But there are MBI, there are a number of mental health providers in the community. And, if you need mental health, there are options out there. And you know, you have ACT for people that have, we were talking about severe mental illness. You have ACT teams.
Mm-hmm.
You have 5 people on your team, and you're getting visited twice a week by people who are coming out to your home. And you're going into the office. They're making sure that you have your medications.
So that's a service that can be available while a person is going through a case in the court, or is this post?
Without a case. If you're in the community in DC and you need that service, you get, you're assessed and they deem that you need that service. And this is going through, I believe you're also going through the Department of Behavioral Health, DBH, and they work with the community providers. Yeah, you should be getting that mental health treatment, with or without.
That's something that they can tap into like during the pendency of the case.
Yes, outside of a judge.
Right.
You don't have to be, a judge doesn't have to order you to go see, a community mental health care provider. You can do that on your own. There are services in DC, and DC does have a lot of services. Enough is arguable. The quality of them, I found them to be pretty good. Caseworkers that I've dealt with while I've had clients who were in mental health treatment, they've shown themselves to be professional and committed for the most part. A few people that are like, but that's the exception. I've seen some people who, went above and beyond the call for clients, picking people up in their car,
right,
taking them to, see a therapist, to see a doctor,
What about bringing them to court? Is that something that you've seen happen?
That occur.
Okay.
That occurred, it may not be mandated, but I know I've been amazed, by people who, have people, this is their personal car.
Right.
Somebody's, I'm taking you. That may not sound like a big thing, but
it is. Yeah.
Well, I had clients who were, had active lice, bed bugs. I've stood next to people and looked and watched, insects crawling in and out of their shirt. For a caseworker to say, come on, I'm taking you here. For somebody who's schizophrenic, get in the car with me and go. That person is doing God's work. That person is saying, it's that type of thing when you not to get too religious, but when Jesus was going in, working with the lepers, working with people, and he was working with mental health. Right. He was working with people with serious mental health issues. He was going where they lived and where they were, into the alleys, into the places where other people didn't want to go. And that's what some of these mental health care workers, these social workers are doing. I definitely appreciate them.
That's powerful. And I really appreciate you sharing those remarks, because it is hard work. It is God's work, I would say, and really requires a commitment and dedication to that work, especially because people don't get paid a lot in those positions. And unfortunately, there is a high turnover, which is not necessarily a good thing for someone who is living with severe mental illness, specifically schizophrenia, and having to reassociate with a new person, get acquainted with a new person so often. That could really impact their symptoms. And create a situation where they don't want to come to court because they don't have Sally that came last week. Now they have Tom that's new to the organization. And just to touch on that, when you have a client that maybe has a history of mental health condition, severe mental illness, how do you encourage them to continue on with the services that are available so that they can get through their case, and hopefully that the disposition is for them to be able to return to the community where they can continue with medical treatment versus incarceration?
That's tough. And it's really client. It goes client to client to client, depending on the situation. A lot of times, people think that, all these horrible crimes are being committed by individuals with, mental health disorders, serious
Right,
disorders.
right. When they're likely to be the victim of a crime versus them committing a crime.
Most of my clients with serious mental health disorders, I mean, like, are not functioning, uh, or functioning on a very low level in society, a lot of times homeless just because they can't maintain employment situations. They can't deal with interaction with other individuals. They're in the court system for minor offenses.
Mm.
It's not that they killed somebody, stabbed somebody, shot somebody, it's like I said, it's, he keeps going, she keeps going back into the McDonald's where they've been barred.
Yeah.
And, or they keep going into areas where someone has got a barring notice for them. But, I had a young lady who, uh, she would go and sleep. She got hit with trespassing, and violating this barring notice because she kept going over to the White House and going to the grounds because she was sleeping there, but she was sleeping there because it was safe.
Mm.
Yeah, she was homeless, but she knew if she could sneak into this area, I'm probably not going to be assaulted here, which made a lot of sense.
Right.
But those are the type of offenses. So
Yeah.
now you've got Secret Service arresting her, bringing her in again and again. So, now she's got literally like 6 cases, all misdemeanors, but until a judge finally says, no, we're going to hold you.
And there is a case before the Supreme Court now, Grants Pass, which is somewhat of a trespass case, and it would prevent people from being able to sleep in public, essentially anywhere in that town, and would have to have an affirmative defense potentially. However, this may work out, but an affirmative defense, like they don't have anywhere else to go and have to prove that, or the officer would have to go through a series of questions to determine, does this person have another place to go before they arrest them, and then then you're into the criminal justice system just to determine whether or not you have another place to go and therefore should be prosecuted or not prosecuted, based on your status as being homeless. I'm butchering the case. Do not cite me. I know I'm a lawyer, but I'm not on that case. But it is a Supreme Court case. It's before the Supreme Court right now. It's one of the last cases that it heard for this session. So it'll be interesting to see how they rule on that.
That's scary.
Yes.
I would.
But there are a lot of jurisdictions that are putting forth these types of laws, and ultimately, arguably, it is criminalizing homelessness.
And that's where we're going.
Criminalizing mental illness.
I read this back in 2022, and I don't follow this person, this presidential candidate. I try not to, stay on the follow the news cycle because they're always there for something crazy. This person, this was in 2022, and I was reading their platform at the time, and they said that if they came back into office, what they were going to do was to clear out the city for all of the homeless and mental health patients, clear them out, take them out, and create tent cities where they could receive the treatment that they need. So basically, we're going to round you up, take you out,
create a jurisdiction just for,
put you in a concentration camp. Mm-hmm. This isn't someplace where you're free to come and go. Now you're in a concentration camp in this tent city, and now we're going to give you treatment. That is the case that you're talking about. People being basically abducted, arrested because I have no place to go. Remember, we closed down this country. We closed down the mental health facilities.
Right.
Basically put people on the street.
Well, because the community-based organizations were supposed to be able to provide the services that these individuals would need.
Like housing?
Like food, like employment, But I think a critical thing that is left out of that equation is the fact that many with severe mental illness uh, deal with anosognosia, which is a lack of insight that they are ill. And
Mm,
therefore, it could be why they don't take the medication or they don't feel that they're ill. So, whatever symptoms that are untreated can lead them to not being able to, as you mentioned earlier, about functioning in a workplace setting, for example. You know, in the movie depicted about Nathaniel Ayers, he is a person that was homeless on Skid Row. He's from Cleveland, I learned, but Jamie Foxx portrayed him in The Soloist.
mm.
He There was a reporter that tried to help him and to get him off the street, to get him housing, and he could not be within four walls. If anyone experiences claustrophobia, for example, if you feel, I don't know what that is, if it's a feeling of being trapped or the walls are closing in on you, who knows? But we could like, well, look, you got a nice apartment. Why don't you just stay in it? Well, everybody does not operate that way. They don't function that way. They have different thoughts about
Mhm.
shelter or work or whatever the case may be.
That's a lot of my clients. I've had that client again and again. It's not as easy as just say, services, go here,
Right.
that. I mean, if that person could follow those instructions, follow up with the appointments,
Right.
I wouldn't have the mental health disorder in the first place. It's because I
Right.
have mental health disorder that I can't take advantage of the help that you want to give me. And it's funny. I've got a case. I just got an order that we have to appear before a judge. One of my clients, again, no names, but pending case. His life really fell apart over a series of years. Lost his wife, lost, really his family, alienated, and everything. This was a person who was unusual because this person had been a millionaire, had
Mm.
run businesses with a couple of hundred employees, and all of this, and it fell apart. Where it turns out, when by the time this person comes into my life as a client, they really have nothing, living in a home in one room, dilapidated home. What used to be $1 million home is now in one room with the leaking water, with utilities cut off and all of that. Turns out this person is suffering from a biological mental disorder, uh, the beginning of dementia,
Mm.
and this fight with the court that if you impose stricture after stricture on a person like this, uh, you're going to set them up for failure. They cannot comply to the same degree and it's not by choice.
Right.
I'm not, so it's, as an attorney, you almost want to scream at a judge to some degree, just leave well enough alone. If this person is not harming themselves, not harming others, if they're coming back to court, if they're, so if they're not a danger, stop messing with them. Stop putting more and more conditions on them because they cannot comply.
Mhm.
Now you're in a situation where you've ordered this and you've ordered that, and they have to do this and they have to do that, and then when they don't comply, they're non-compliance. You violate the court's orders. This person has been locked up on 2 different occasions, each time for in excess of 3 weeks in jail. Should
Mm.
not have happened. And I'm screaming, yelling, "Stop! What are you doing?" But I don't wear the robes.
Right.
I
Right.
don't make those decisions. I just, I advocate, but at a certain point, I don't make the decision. And there's nobody else to go to. There's no appeal.
Mhm.
It's not, uh, post trial. This is, there's no final judgment or anything to appeal from. And the
Right.
judges in their right to do this. It wasn't that it was illegal, but you, you just wish there was more wisdom and understanding, more empathy, more compassion. Just understand this is still a person. This
Right.
could be you one day. This could be me
Mhm.
one day. And, you know, what do you do when society is not being as kind as they should be?
Or is that and just ticking the boxes, checking the boxes off, and we have to understand there needs to be more of focusing on the characteristics, the behaviors that a person exhibits having a severe mental illness, right? Like you said, not being able to comply, or maybe sometimes they can comply and sometimes they can't. That shouldn't subject them to being terminated from a program. Like, your program is there for people who live like this, so your program should be developed with the consideration of the types of behaviors that a person with these mental health disorders will exhibit, and
Right.
not be so quick to terminate them. But I guess that's, living in a fantasy world and hoping that something like that could come about where there is. But I must say that is where the voice of advocates, the voice of attorneys, the voice of families and friends are critically important,
Yeah.
because we need your voices to be able to contact, the court, or to contact the PO, the probation officer, members of the ACT team, the assertive community treatment team, um, and other programs, in order to speak on behalf of that person that lives with a severe mental illness, because many times they're not able to speak up for themselves, or they're not being heard. So it's important for us to be able to use our voices with that. So I truly appreciate all of the information that you've shared with us today, Attorney Iverson, and just want to give a shout out to your law firm, and also your practice at DI. Say it again. Is it F? No, it's D Iverson Law.
FD Iverson.
FDIversonlaw.com. FDIversonlaw.com.
Iverson Law Firm.
Yes. And check out the new website. You got a new website, you new headshots. But more seriously, if you're in need for personal injury services, criminal defense, or civil work, including work for sexual harassment in the workplace.
Plaintiff's work. Yes.
Sexual harassment plaintiff's work. Please
Yes.
Take the opportunity to look at the services that Attorney Iverson provides. Also, because we are both lawyers and we're talking about the criminal justice system, just want people to understand and know that there are so many resources available. You don't have to have a mental health disorder to care about your mental health. It is a part of our overall being. Our physical and mental health make up us, right? So just so that you know, there is a program called Wellbeing in Law. I had an attorney at my job that reminded me that I told him about it last year, but I don't remember doing that. But there is the Institute for Wellbeing that was established to focus on the mental health of lawyers, and not just lawyers, but those who work in the law, period. So please take an opportunity or take time to look into that. The Institute for Wellbeing. That week was celebrated May 6th through the 10th. And as I indicated at the top of the hour, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So please learn about resources that are available. We mentioned a few today: Mental Health America, NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Attorney Iverson mentioned the ACT team, which is the Assertive Community Treatment Team. So please take the opportunity to research those. If you don't need the information, please share it with others in your churches, your workplace, and other social organizations that you may be involved in. So, Attorney Iverson, please share with us some of your wisdom for this long practice that you've had over the years, being a father, being a mentor to people in the community. Please share some parting words with the audience today.
I don't know. Just take care of each other. Mm-hmm. We're all in this together. It could be you. Mm-hmm. It could be you when you see someone in the community that, is going through something, is having some problems, have some empathy and understand. This could be you. This could be a family member. We are all one community. Even if it makes you a little uncomfortable, this person is on your block. They're making noise when they shouldn't be making noise. They're disturbing you. But understand that world that they're living in is so much more fraught with danger and, fear on their part. Just show some love.
Yes. And
Shows.
I appreciate you with that final example. And I want to give this resource to make sure people understand. If you see someone that you believe is having a mental health crisis, please know that you can call 988 instead of 911. We want to continue the campaign that was a part of NAMI's campaign, Help, Not Handcuffs. You can call 988 instead of 911 so that those with mental health service professionals can come out and address the situation. It may also include law enforcement also, but they are trained to deal with de-escalating a mental health crisis and treating it as a medical situation versus a criminal situation. So again, 988. Thank you so much, Attorney Iverson. Truly appreciate you taking time out for this conversation.
Went too quick.
Very enlightening.
It was an hour. Like I
Yeah,
want
it was an hour. See, you thought it was going to take a long time, but yep, we made it through the hour. So thank you again. I appreciate you.
No, thank you. Keep doing the work that you're doing. You are doing God's work.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.